Aquí estamos con Kellep Charles, que va a estar dando la charla de Security Vulnerability, Assessment Process, Best Practice and Challenge. Espero que la disfruten. Los dejo aquí con Kellep.
Okay, no problem. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Kellep Charles, and today I will be speaking on the Security Vulnerability Assessment Process, best practices, and challenges as a practitioner. Just to give you a brief information about myself, I am an information security practitioner in the Washington, D.C. area with over 20 years of experience. In conjunction to being a practitioner, I'm also an educator, a researcher, and a student. So again, I'm pretty heavy within the field. My capabilities and my introduction to vulnerability scanning and security assessment took a very weird road to this point right here. Back in 2000, while working at the Pentagon, I was a firewall administrator. We were handling Sidewinders, Gauntlet, PIX firewalls, Juniper firewalls, and in conjunction to handling the firewalls, we also had servers for log management, application management, and so forth for the firewalls. Our information assurance team at the Pentagon had gotten this new tool called Information Security Scanner. And basically they said once a month we would be scanning the systems to find out what vulnerabilities are available. So I remember coming in one Monday at about 8:30, and I had a voicemail on my phone saying, "Hey, Kellep, we need to talk to you. You guys have a lot of vulnerabilities and you're making the network very vulnerable." And when I looked at my email, I also saw an email saying the same thing to all the managers and everyone that was in the organization. So I already knew it was going to be a long day. Me and my team were sitting, we're like, what are we going to do? And we knew it was important because 3 of the IA guys came into our area with this report that was about this thick, showing us over 200 vulnerabilities that we had. So they left it here, managers are emailing us, my phone is ringing. And as we're sitting there, and they left, and me and my team were looking at it, and I could remember like it was yesterday, and pardon my French, one of my teammates said, "Hey, this is bullshit." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "We don't have any net bias. We only have Unix systems, and we don't have a lot of these things." So on that day, I learned a very valuable word, and that word was called false positives. So I crafted an email stating that, hey, this report is not accurate. In fact, a majority of this information is not accurate. 2 minutes later, the guys come back in, they take the report, they apologize and say, hey, we're gonna run another scan. I was like, okay, we dodged the bullet. So the next day, they came back with another scan, and it was only 2 sheets. So in looking at the report, I was like, okay, this is much better, but I remember that there were some vulnerabilities in the original 200 vulnerabilities that we did have that I didn't see anymore. So at that particular time, I learned another word. Who could tell me what that word is?
Negative.
False negative. I didn't fight it, but I knew that there was the concept of false negative and false positives. So for the next 3 years, we're getting these monthly scan reports. 1 month, it's a big booklet. The next day, it's 1 sheet. And it just went on like this for about 2-3 years. And what actually started to happen is not only us, but other aspects of the organization were not taking the report seriously because the accuracy wasn't right, the methodology wasn't correct. So fast forward, a friend of mine says, hey, we have this opportunity at NASA, we're looking for a new information security engineer. I was like, hey, I'll come by, took the interview, got the position, and they said, we would like you to run our vulnerability assessment program. So the very thing that I hated for 3 years that I didn't believe in, now I was going to have to head this particular program and find some sort of value into it. And I knew from my reading and just general aspect that there is a lot of benefits in vulnerability scanning, but again, it's all in the methodology, it's all in the process, and it's all in how you work for it. So that brought me to the point of, okay, now we have to make this happen. So when we talk about vulnerability assessment, it has become a very important part of an organization. And one of the things that I realized being at NASA and working under FISMA is that not only was it a best practice, but it was a regulatory practice that you had to do. And if you didn't, there was a lot of issues that came along with it. And one of the key things that I realized is when I had first came into the industry, when they rolled out laptops and desktops, we all had the same operating system. They used a technique called ghost, and basically it would ghost all the systems and give everyone the same operating system and setup. So if there was an issue, a new patch that came out, or any type of security update that needed to actually occur, it was pretty easy to patch that. But as time evolved, we realized that, hey, our clients have multiple versions of Windows. Linux started getting introduced, as well as Mac OS. So not only did we realize that, hey, we didn't have a single operating system environment, we had an operating environment that had multiple systems. And if a patch came out, it required more research. So again, that's another value that we saw in actually implementing the vulnerability assessment process. One of the key things that I remember reading is that on average, it is stated that an individual may have about 33 different applications on their systems. Now, the more traditional applications, such as your web browsers and Adobe, you'll have some updates, saying like, hey, this application needs to be updated. But sometimes you have that label maker application for a function that you had in the company 2 years ago that you installed, but there's no updates that are reminding you that this has a security hole to it. So we realized that not only do you have the major applications, but you had some simple applications that you downloaded for a particular solution that is still on the system. And again, those might have some holes within those applications. The distributed computing environment, don't need to go too deep into that, but again, you have systems at different locations, your remote accessing systems from one location to another location. So again, that introduces some more aspects for the need of vulnerability scanning and assessment. And the last one pertains to internet-enabled devices. These are devices that may not be totally within the trusted zone. It may be in a DMZ or even out there on the internet. These systems need to be scanned. So one of the things that I realized is that with all of these different aspects is that knowing the state of your security posture was very important. And one of the best tools that we had to use in my organization was the vulnerability assessment and to use it in a proper way. So one of the key things that I wanted to kind of bring into shape was traditionally it was all about preventive, using a firewall, using access lists, or even detective, that you have your intrusion detection system and you're able to monitor your security environment. But many individuals in the DoD and security professionals realized that this wasn't enough. We needed visibility within our environment. If somehow they were to circumvent the perimeter security, we need to understand what's actually going on the inside. So in doing so, the vulnerability scanning aspect became more of a proactive or offensive, depending on who you spoke to. And we'll try to take a poll on that. So again, it became more of a proactive aspect. So one of the key things that we realize is that most systems are not patched at all time. If you remember like the Slammer and some of the other viruses in the early going, that many of these viruses had patches available, but they were never implemented. And when these malware was introduced into the environment, they spread like wildfire. It's not because it was a 0 day or there was no solution to it, it's just that they were unpatched. Also, you have the problem of most compromise are from unpatched systems, and some systems cannot be patched. For example, in my environment, we have legacy systems. And I remember in DerbyCon about 3 or 4 years ago, someone was talking about that they scanned the internet and they found a whole bunch of Windows NT systems. And everyone was laughing, but I wasn't really laughing because I know in my environment we have maybe about 3 or 4 of those NT systems that he found when he was scanning the internet. And this is mainly because when you have custom code and you build it on that particular platform, and then you need to upgrade that code, and the management sees the cost to move the code from this Windows NT system to a more modern operating system, they do a risk management, and the bean counters come in and say, hey, this is too much and we can't do it, so we need to find some alternative security measures. But the problem is that there's no more patches in these systems, and if these systems are not protected correctly, again, this is another vulnerability issue that you have to deal with. So again, also why it's so important, and this is something that's near and dear and you hear me talk about a lot, mainly deals with compliance. Being part of FISMA, having a report, go through the different assessments and ANAs that we go through. If we don't have this in place, it becomes a major problem. So there are different assessment levels that we conduct within our organization. The first one deals with the basic security assessment level. This is when we look at the physical, we just do a basic snapshot of the environment. Sometimes we may not even actually do a security scan, but we check to make sure that you have sign-in sheets in your processing facilities, that warning banners are available, that you have documents in place. But again, it's more of a basic question and answer walkthrough, making sure that you have fire extinguishers and all the proper things in place. The next option is definitely more in depth. It takes more time, and this deals with the in-depth security assessment. Within the in-depth security assessment, we look at manual checks, making sure that you have the proper lockouts for your accounts, making sure that you're conducting log management, conduct a detailed security scan. And again, when I talk about a detailed security scan, we'll talk about it in the next few slides, but there's authenticated security scans and unauthenticated security scans, and we try to go to the level of doing authentication. A lot of political aspects with authenticated security scans, but again, this is the kind of things that we look for. Again, we do a detailed physical security check, making sure that you have emergency lighting, that you have plastic sheeting. And a lot of these things sound kind of foolish, emergency lighting, plastic sheeting, fire extinguishing capabilities. But again, as part of the FISMA regulation, these are all the things that are very important to function in your processing facility. We have two other assessments. One is the external testing. When we talk about the external testing, we look at it from the hacker's view, from an external view. We conduct a scan, we try to see what can we see from the outside. Is your firewall configured correctly? Or if we were in a scan, are we able to see certain ports or gain access into your facility? And again, that's pertaining to the external scan. And with the internal scan, we look at it from an insider threat to make sure that there are controls in place to prevent the insider threat from becoming an issue. And also we look for segmentation, that if you were to have some sort of malicious code within your environment, how fast would that spread? How fast would you be able to detect it, respond to it? So again, when we conduct these security scanning as well as these assessments, those are the 4 main categories that we deal with. And for this to be successful, as I spoke about in the beginning, is that you need a methodology. This needs to be a methodology that is repeatable, not only because when you conduct these assessments, you're going to the location maybe once a year or twice a year. And if the process is not the same, it becomes a bit of an issue. Also, in staffing, if you have new staffing that comes in, or someone who was in a location this year, but a different individual is returning to the location the next year. By having a repeatable process, everyone is at the same page. And this is like a very important thing, because one of the key things that we face sometimes is that someone will conduct a process, will conduct a scanning process and not use credentials, will do a document review and not conduct a checklist review. Then the next year, a different individual come and does it the proper way. It becomes an issue, because it's like, well, that's not how it was done last year, and we prepared in a particular way from how it was done last year. So again, to have a repeatable process makes the solution go a lot better. Also, one of the key things is that reports are very constructive when it comes to conducting security assessments. One of the key things is trending reports. What's going on over a period of time. And one of the key things is that most individuals think because this particular month you had 10 findings, but the next month you have 25 findings, that you did something wrong. When in actuality, it might have been a new vulnerability that came out, or a new plugin that was in the security assessment vulnerability scanning tools. So again, when you're looking at the reporting, when you're looking at the trending information, you need to look just beyond the numbers. You need to look like what caused the numbers to increase and what caused the numbers to even decrease. So again, that's one of the key things that we look into. So when we talk about the process has 6 phases that we go through. We have the pre-security assessment process, the security assessment in brief, the actual field work, the report and preparation, the outbrief, and the post-assessment process. And I'll discuss each one briefly. So when we talk about the pre-assessment process, before you could go to any organization, you need authorization. You need scheduling and tons of paperwork, non-disclosure agreement. So within the pre-security assessment process, this is where you engage the client, you ask the client that you need to come in, all proper paperwork is provided. Dates are provided, and once everything is signed off on, if it's a remote assessment, you start preparing travel. If it's a local assessment, you just start preparing the time to go in and conduct the assessment. At the end brief, this is once you get to the customer location. You discuss what the schedule is going to be, what you're going to assess. Again, if it's an in-depth process, if it's an external process, what resources you'll need. If you need firewall administrators, network administrators, most of the time they are in the meeting as well. The managers are in the meeting as well. And basically, you kind of gather all the resources that you need and work along with the scheduling. The security assessment field work is where the actual work is being done. And this may take anywhere from 2 days to about 5 days, depending on the size of the network and what work is being done. But again, one of the key things that we do, we conduct a security interview using the 800.53 checklist. So we try to make sure that they cover all aspects. Again, dealing with audits, dealing with compliance, change management, risk management, but we kind of go through the whole 853. That usually takes about 2 or 3 hours. And what you're looking is to have a discussion on some of these controls. It's not a yes or no type of thing. It's that, do you have an incident response plan? And they'll say yes. And you'll be like, well, is it a written process? How was it distributed? Do you have a backup plan? When was the last time it was tested? So you kind of go through a discussion and try to find certain aspects to look at and discuss. With the scanning, you set up the scanning tool, you run the scanning information. Most of the time you'll get the results within 2 or 3 hours. You go through the scanning tools with the client and you discuss false positives that may be there. You investigate the findings to make sure that they are there. And what we usually do is, after we give them about 2 days within the process, that if they want to do any type of patching, any type of configuration corrections, and then what we'll do is run a second scan. and most of the time the results are a little better on the second scan, and we leave for that particular day. But the walkthrough process, this is something that a lot of facilities do not take seriously, where we walk through the processing facility to make sure that you have the right kind of racks, you have the sign-in sheets, you have fire retardant controls in place. That's one of the key areas that a lot of our clients get hit on the first time around, because you know, you get paid to make sure that the systems are updated, that you have the right firewall, but you don't pay special attention to the physical control of things. And one of the key things that I remember going to the different security conferences, and you have like the Lockpick Village and the different kind of social engineering, and a lot of the newer guys, some of my students I teach, and I have them come to some of the security conferences in the DC area. And they're like, you know, why is there a Lockpick Village here? Why do they have these guys? What does that have to do with information security? And one of the key things is that physical security has a lot to do with information security, because if someone could just walk into your processing facility, put a USB drive, unplug your systems, that could cause a major compromise within the CIA with availability, confidentiality, and even integrity. So again, we kind of bring to the fact that physical security plays a big part, and it's a mindset and a culture that we've changed a lot, but again, it took a while. And document reviews are another key aspect. We review the documents to make sure that they're updated, that you have a contingency plan. The contingency plan was updated within the past year. So again, it's very in-depth when we talk about an in-depth security process. But again, it's very beneficial for the organization once it happens. One of the last steps is to conduct a report. We take all the information from the qualitative assessment as well as the quantitative assessment, and we put that into what we call a security assessment report. It might be kind of hard to see, but this was a sample that I provided. Basically, this section right here is more of the quantitative information by the scanning data. Basically, how many systems did we scan? How many high-level findings did we find, medium and low? Sometimes we might have findings that do not have patches available because maybe the vendor hasn't created the patches as of yet. So we kind of break that out to the high findings and the findings that are not available. And we go through secure configuration metrics, security requirements, as well as document review. And this is a snapshot of everything that we went through that they could see it in an executive format. And within the outbrief, we talk about it. And one of the key things is that once we leave, the job is not over. Basically, we allow them about 30 days to 45 days to correct anything that couldn't have been corrected during our visit. Because all of these reports go to a higher level management because they need to identify if they're going to accept the risk of any of the findings or not accept the risk. So again, we give them about 30 days to provide us any remediations. We update the security assessment report, and after the 30 days or 45 days, we send it up, and a new branch of risk managers and system owners kind of take effect into that particular time frame. And the last process is the post-security assessment process. This is when we get together as a team and we talk about the different aspects of the security assessment. For example, if the flight wasn't a good flight and there was probably a better way that you could have flown to the location or the hotel or any type of political problems that you received at the site, any process that did not work too well. This is where we kind of come together. We have a group discussion and correct our process before the next assessment or before we go back to that particular location. So one of the key things that's a little pet peeve for me deals with definitions sometimes. And a lot of times you'll have someone come in and say, hey, these guys are conducting a security assessment or these guys are doing a pen test in our system, and the definitions don't always align. So what I decided to do was, one, provide a definition of a security assessment. And when you conduct a security assessment, the main focus is trying to find as many findings, as many items that you could find within the organization. So if you have 100 systems, you run a security scan, and 50 findings come back, you take that and you do some sort of analysis and review. When we're talking about a pen test, and for those pen testers, if you could hopefully help me out if I'm a little off, is that what you're looking to do is find one hole and say, hey, we could get into your system. Proof of concept or something. But there's no need, if there's 100 holes, you don't need to find all 100. You just need to prove that, hey, I could either get into your facility or I could get into your web server or something. And when we talk about an audit is more of like a checklist, more of a paperwork, where FSMA 1.0 was one of the key things, is that, do you have a backup? Check, yes we do. Do you have a firewall? Check, yes we do. But again, it doesn't ensure any security. And one of the key things is that we always talk about in the government is that compliance does not mean that you're secure. And a few years ago, you used to have a lot of federal agencies that would get an A within their FSMA score, but 2 or 3 weeks later, there would be a big breach. And everyone would be like, how can that be? They had an A in their FSMA score. But again, compliance does not mean that you're secure. And that was one of the key things that made FSMA go from FSMA 1.0 to FSMA 2.0, that required a little more work and a little more check and continuous monitoring and all the different aspects that come into play. So one of the key things that I always have a problem with is conducting credential scans versus uncredential scans, or authenticated scanning versus unauthenticated scanning. Many times when you go in and you say, hey, we're going to run a scan and we need some sort of credentials to be able to scan to get more information out of the scan. And many times the system administrator says, hey, why do you need credentials for? If a hacker were to break in, they're not going to have credentials. They're going to come in and try to break into the system. And we're like, yeah, that's correct, but in the past couple of years, many of the breaches mainly did not happen through credentials, through someone gaining user access and passwords. It came through applications that allowed you system access and so forth. But so by us having the credentials, we're able to look at the systems in a deeper way to see if it's patched, if there's any issues that needs to be looked at beyond just a surface scan. So again, it becomes a little bit of a political issue, and again, depending on the site, will depend on how you're able to relate that kind of information. So one of the key things that I always kind of mention is that if you have a car and you go into the garage and you tell them, and it's running rough, and the mechanic will, put his ear in the car and listen, and he can say, hey, maybe it's running too rich, or your spark plugs, or one of your coils are not working well. But he'll take a guess, and that's why the non-credential scan actually is. But if you allow the mechanic to plug in one of his tools in there and have it run, he'll be able to get these codes and give you a much better understanding of what is wrong with the car. So that's what a credential scan does for you. It gives you a much deeper look into the operating system to tell you for sure what needs to be done. So with that being said, I had scanned a Windows 7 box, and this was an Un-credential scan. So again, if someone were to run this scan, they'll feel good after the scan. They say, hey, we had no highs, no mediums, 1 low, and 5 informational. We are good, we're very secure, let's go to lunch. But the same scan with a credential shows something totally different, because we're able to get more information. At this particular point, we had 7 highs, 8 mediums, and 5 lows, and 172 informationals. So again, that gives you a much deeper look into the box. And you multiply this by an environment with 25, 50, or 100 box, it could get pretty ridiculous and pretty high. So just to kind of get an idea of what are some of the vulnerabilities that we found within that. Again, the first one, administrator user's password never expires. This is a no-no in the world of computing. But again, without the credential scans, that wasn't seen. With credential scans, we were able to see that. And there were some other ones that also showed like some overflows and some denial of service. But again, just to let you know the difference between a credential scan and an uncredential scan could be a major difference within your organization. So another thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is that sometimes to get a credential scan on a Unix box or on a Windows box means that you need to go in and change some of the configurations. And some of the configurations might make the box a little less secure. So again, this is another one of those political battles that you need to kind of be able to work with. The first one shows a uncredential scan, but the key components were not available. But for the credential scan, we needed to have remote registry, remote file system access, and administrator authentication available. So again, if you're following FDCC and certain SCAPs as part of your build, these things might not be available. And if you do want to run credential scans, you're going to need to work with the system administrator, do some sort of coordination to get these things turned on, to get the results that you want, and turn them off afterwards. Again, you know, it could be a political battle depending on your environment and what's going on. And we talked about FDCC, but these are some of the system hardening frameworks that we recommend and that we see when we do go and conduct our scans. You have the CIS benchmark. The FDCC is what we use in the federal government to tighten our desktops. The STIGs are very popular, and SCAPs, and the SCAP protocol. So basically, these are just some basic requirements saying, hey, remote registry shouldn't be turned on. You should not have administrative password in play. You know, just a list of things that allow you to have a more secure working environment. So I showed you the credential scans that had the 7 and 8 highs and mediums. But again, as I stated, if you have 100 systems and you have, let's say, 200 highs and 400 mediums, how do you go about correcting that? Because that becomes a logistical nightmare. And just going in and patching everything and just throwing patches everywhere, we realize it's not the best way to do it because it usually causes unforeseen problems. So one of the key things is the vulnerability management process, is to prioritize. One of the key things that we'll say, if you have a lot of Adobe or SQL or Oracle, we'll recommend that you kind of concentrate with those particular groups first. And a lot of times when you put a patch in, it takes care of more than one highs, and it also propagates down to the mediums and lows. So again, prioritizing and finding a way that you want to tackle all of these vulnerabilities will really be helpful. We have some organizations that'll do the servers first and try to patch all the servers and go to the desktops and the network equipment. And again, my favorite is just follow a particular vendor. So you do Adobe, you try to knock out as much of the Adobe as possible. You do Oracle, you try to knock out as much of the Oracle as possible. Sometimes it's just patching. So you can try to patch all the systems and all the available patches. You see what's going from that point. Then you go into the configuration aspects, like certain configurations that you need to do. But again, it's just finding a way that you can actually conduct these mitigations and monitor them to make sure that they're not causing additional problems and system resource issues within your environment. This is just some examples of some of the regulatory bodies that are out there that requires vulnerability scanning and vulnerability management as part of your daily InfoSec practices. Again, as stated, FISMA is where my category lies in, but again, PCI and some of the other ones does require some sort of scanning to be done. And again, this could be done from an internal individuals, or you could also have an external individual come and conduct these things. But again, the bottom line is when it's time to submit the report, when it's time to show that you've met that requirement, you need to be sure that you do have that information in play. And these slides will be available on my website, and I'll tell you what the website is, as well as I'm pretty sure the B-Size PR will have this out. But we have a list of some of the security scanning tools that are out there. The main ones that I use is the MVM, which used to be part of McAfee and Intel, but unfortunately, I think they're about to be extinct in another year or so. And we use OpenVAS religiously. We're kind of looking to jump into the world of Nessus, and I don't know if anyone is using anything that they, think is pretty interesting, but I'd be more than happy to take some recommendations as well. But OpenVAS and the MVM is our main tools of choice. We've used Saint for a while, but we stopped using Saint about 2 years ago. But one of the key things about Saint that was pretty cool, it had the patch capability, where certain vulnerabilities you might be able to patch directly from Saint. We never got it to work, but it was one of the marketing ploys that got us interested at first. But Saint is a tool that we're not using anymore. And I'll go briefly through some of these slides, but again, there's some other considerations that you need to take into consideration. One is waivers and plan of actions. Again, sometimes there's certain things that you can't mitigate. It can be due to remote access that's needed because it's part of the mission and it's coming up as a high vulnerability. So the organization could issue a waiver saying that we understand the risk and keeping this particular method, technique, or vulnerability in place, and we'll take any of the weight if something were to happen. Virtualization, again, is another big thing. Sometimes individuals will have a virtualized desktop with a different operating system, and one of the key things we try to do, we try to scan those as well. But for them, they don't really see it as part of the operating system because it's something that they use a couple of times a week, or it's not the actual operating system. But again, it has internet access, it needs to be patched, so that's another political issue that you need to kind of fight through if that is the case. Cloud computing has been a big issue. Again, many vendors won't allow you to scan within their network. And if compliance is one of the key things, you need to make the right kind of arrangements to make sure that you are being able to get the data. Being part of the government, FedRAMP is what we use to make sure that we are in line with compliant-based cloud computing providers. But again, that is something that you need to look at. One of the key things that I've noticed in the past year is that we've gone from a highly technical know-how of system administrators and managers to negotiators because of the change in cloud computing. Being able to configure a router blindfolded is not as important anymore as being able to negotiate the right kind of cloud computing solution. So that's one of the things that I've been seeing a major change when I go and speak to my clients and I go to their organization to conduct security assessments. Politics, you can't get away from politics. But one of the key things in going to someone's environment and conducting the security assessment is that you got to know how to talk and how to deal with them. Just going in there and saying, yes, this is a vulnerability, and yes, you have Tomcat on the system, could cause some major issues. So being able to talk, being able to prove, sometimes having to eat crow might be some of the things that you need to do to get the mission accomplished at the end of the day. Distributed scanning, this is one of the key things that we've kind of gone to. Before, when we would scan internal, we would have to take our laptops and go from one department to the next department. But now we're able to put keys, scanners in different network segments and reach these systems, and that has made work a lot easier for us. I'm not getting as much Fitbit steps per day anymore, but it does make life a lot easier. Patch management and penetration testing, again, are key components to kind of round off the whole aspect. So, as I'm coming to an end, I've talked about vulnerability scanning and security assessment and all the great things that it can do, but there are certain things that it cannot do, and you need to be aware of that. One of the key things is that it cannot find a zero-day malware for you. So basically, it works in a signature-based technology. If the facets or the signatures are within the scanner and you run the scanner, it'll find the malware. But if it's not in the scanner, it won't show up. So again, It won't find any 0 days. For the most part, it can't conduct any patching. So it'll find a vulnerability for you, but you need to get the additional resources to conduct the patching. And the last thing, again, is that it can't tell you if it's a false positive or false negative. So these are the things that, you know, as an assessor, as a system administrator, you need to go through the extra step to make sure that you can determine if it's a false negative or a false positive. So, again, the key thing that I wanted to leave with you today is that just solely relying on preventive and detective is not the way to run your security environment. It needs to be a total collaboration with preventive, detective, response, security awareness, as well as proactive measures in using the vulnerability scanner. One of the key things also is the due diligence. You know, if you are conducting these scans and you are keeping track of the vulnerabilities that you have in place, if something were to go wrong, again, you've done your due diligence and you might be able to save your job. So that's all I have. I have my contact information here. Feel free to contact me if you need any the presentations or just want to chat and say hello. But again, it was my pleasure to present some of the things that I do in the world of security assessment, vulnerability scanning, and I'll take any questions if anyone has any questions right
now. We're sure on the hardware and software side. Do you ever get any questions? Are people prepared to use the system? Do you see anything related to awareness, educating the user or the system people how to use the system effectively? And there's some other questions. You do these assessments. Does anybody ask you to do an assessment because the cyber insurance people need you to be sure you're going to be safe? So if they order in order to issue the insurance.
Right. For the second portion, working within the federal government space, we have a pretty strict rule of engagement with the sites that we deal with. But I do have some friends who work for like the big consultants, and a lot of the assessments that they do are for compliance issues, but as well as the due diligence that I talked about for insurance issues as well. So within the private sector, there is a lot of the due diligence that needs to occur within the vulnerability scanning world. As for helping these system administrators and how to operate their systems, one of the key things as an assessor, we never touch the systems. We don't do any configurations, even when we do manual checks, and we want to make sure that the firewall's in place or anything. We all do this like shoulder surfing. We may say, hey, you need to go in here, or you need to run this particular command, but we never touch the system. So again, everything that we do is from a verbal recommendation aspect, and they usually do most of the driving.
So last week there was this big attack based on security cameras and DVRs, and I was wondering, are the tools that you use for scanning, would those have picked up those kind of issues?
Not all of them, but they would have picked up some of those issues. And I think there's, I was reading about it, I think there's some scanners that are out there basically for the IoT type of devices. But what a lot of these assessment vendors, the scanner vendors are doing are adding those plugins into the scanners now. So again, the cameras that you're talking about in an engagement that we had in Texas, we were able to pick up some information on these wireless cameras that I've never seen before. And I didn't realize that those plugins were in there. And the ruling engagement did not pertain to those cameras, but as a courtesy, we were like, hey, you know, this is something, these firmware is something that you might want to do. So I think a lot of the vendors are realizing that the IoT is definitely becoming a big thing. Now, again, I think it's very limited because having a refrigerator or toaster at an organization is very unlikely, so they may not concentrate on those plugins as much, but definitely like the cameras and other devices, they're definitely jumping both feet into that. Okay, I'll be around all day, so if you have any other questions, I'll be more than happy to answer it. But again, it's been my privilege, and that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.